You're watching Adam the Bull on the Bet Rivers Network.
Welcome, everybody, to the latest edition of the Bullpen with Adam the Bull. It's a breaking news Monday. Let me be honest with you here, as I always am. I had already recorded a podcast for this Monday, but as 20 minutes after I was done recording, the news broke about Myles Garrett, and so that podcast goes down the toilet, never to be heard. And now this one is the one on record. The big news, in case you've been living under a rock, is that Myles Garrett has requested a trade from the Cleveland Browns. Not a huge shocker to me. I know some fans like to pretend the media just stirs trouble and makes things up. We'll probably get blamed for this too. But the reality is this was always a possibility. I just said last week, both here and on UCSS, that I thought the Browns should trade Myles Garrett. And now he may be forcing their hand. The news was first broken by Ian Rappaport of NFL Network, and Myles Garrett actually put out a statement, which is bizarre. I don't think I've ever remember this, seeing a statement put out on the day a player requests a trade. Usually a statement's put out when the guy gets traded and he thanks the city he worked for. But what you'll notice, if you haven't heard this, is that it is a direct shot at the general manager of the Cleveland Browns, Andrew Berry. And if you were not a fan of Andrew Berry to begin with, if you were not a fan of this regime to begin with, well, this is going to make you feel even worse. This, again, from Myles Garrett. As a kid dreaming of the NFL, all I focused on was the ultimate goal of winning a Super Bowl. And that goal fuels me today more than ever. My love for the community of Northeast Ohio and the incredible fan base of the Cleveland Browns has made this one of the toughest decisions of my life. These past 8 years have shaped me into the man I am today. While I've loved calling this city my home, my desire to win and compete on the biggest stages won't allow me to be complacent. The goal was never to go from Cleveland to Canton. It has always been to compete for a win and a Super Bowl. It has always been to compete for and win a Super Bowl. With that in mind, I've requested to be traded from the Cleveland Browns, Myles Garrett. Just last week, Andrew Berry said definitively the Browns will not trade Myles Garrett. And he said specifically, Myles Garrett will go straight from Cleveland to Canton. The fact that not only Myles Garrett put out a statement, but the fact that he used those exact words that Andrew Berry used against him is an overwhelming shot at Andrew Berry. Andrew Berry has done a poor job as GM. It's hard to have much faith in him. In fact, in the podcast that I had recorded that was originally going to be out today, I made the point of saying, yeah, I understand none of us have a lot of faith in Andrew Berry, but if you think he's 100% going to get it wrong, well, then what's the point of rooting for anything? And that couldn't be more on point than this. It's hard. Any faith you had in Andrew Berry, any faith that I had in Andrew Berry, which is already pretty low, I thought he should have been fired. And then when I flip-flopped on Kevin Stefanski and was like, all right, got to give Kevin Stefanski one more shot, my thought was, okay, he and Berry are a team. Let him do it one more year. Well, all of that looks really bad right now. This is a huge indictment of the Cleveland Browns. It's a huge indictment of Andrew Berry specifically and the job he has done. Myles Garrett is telling you that he has no faith that the Cleveland Browns can turn it around. And it is hard to blame him. The reality is there's almost no chance of the Browns going to the playoffs next year. Their only chance is if they are able to get a quarterback this offseason and get significantly better quarterback play. The odds of them being able to do that in 1 year are not likely. It's not impossible, but it's unlikely, especially in a conference and a division that has all the talent that it does. We know this. Now, the question is, will the Browns definitely trade Myles Garrett? Well, on the surface, it seems like a no-brainer. Usually when superstars ask for a trade, they get traded. like Khalil Mack, for example. When Khalil Mack was traded to the Bears, and Khalil Mack was 2 years younger than Myles Garrett, although in my opinion, Myles Garrett is a much better player. Well, is a much better player than Khalil Mack. At the time, Khalil Mack was traded along with a second-round pick and a late pick for 2 first-round picks and a third-round pick and a late pick. Okay? So Khalil Mack and a second-round pick essentially for 2 1s and a 3. So my first thought is, well, the Browns have to get at least that much, if not more. Myles Garrett's better. He may be a little older, but he's better. He was still elite this past season, still one of, if not the best pass rusher in the league this season. Probably the best, right? On the other hand, it's complicated from a Browns standpoint. Could the Browns be a team that refuses to trade the superstar? Seems unlikely. However, Albert Breer of Monday Morning Quarterback did say that he believes that the Browns will not trade. Now, well, I shouldn't say that. He didn't give his opinion. This is what he said on Twitter. Myles Garrett made his trade request public today, but the Browns' position on Garrett has not changed. The team has no plans to deal him per source. And then in parentheses, he writes, but that certainly won't stop teams from calling. Yeah, I get what Albert's saying. I think the Browns are going to try to, they don't have to trade Myles Garrett. They could play a game of chicken with him. They could, they could say, hey, Myles, we're not trading you. And Myles could choose to sit out, not play. Or at some point, he may not make that decision. At one point, David Njoku wanted to be traded. I can't remember now if he had made an official request, but they didn't trade him. Now, David Njoku is a nice player, but he's not Myles Garrett. He's not a superstar. He's not a All-Pro, Hall of Fame type player. In pretty much every case where this level of player has requested a trade, he's been traded. Obviously, there will be a ton of teams looking to trade for him. But it's complicated for a number of reasons. Not only because the Browns just said they wouldn't trade him. Albert Breer says from his source, they're still not planning on trading him. The Browns have said they're not doing a rebuild, which they really are. But they would probably like to do it with him. But here's what makes it complicated as well. There are cap issues in terms of the situation we know about. Very complicated when it comes to the cap. Jason, not Jason's last name, but who writes for Over the Cap, just said this. The Garrett trade would not be very easy for the Browns to work with on their salary cap. He's been restructured every year, which means over $36 million in cap charges if he's traded, and he has a bonus due in March as well. Just to run a quick scenario, again, this is Jason from Over the Cap. Just to run a quick scenario, but prior to adjustments, the Browns would need to restructure Watson and Ward to the fullest and cut Conklin to trade Garrett. Doing all of that would leave them with likely between $2 and $7 million in cap space, depending on where the cap winds up. This would leave them in a Saints-like situation. Really, outside of those 3 moves, there is little they can do besides extending Newsome and then June 1sting some players so they can sign rookies. Doing the math on this, the better option is probably extending Garrett and coming up with a dollar figure that would make him happy to be part of a rebuild next year. So Jason from Over the Cap, obviously not an insider in terms of dealing with front offices, but he knows a lot about cap space, is saying, hey, the Browns are better off keeping him. Albert Breer says the Browns are not inclined to trade him. Andrew Berry said flat out, we will not trade him. So this is going to be a battle of wills. One other thing I want to mention on before I get into this further, Diana Rossini of The Athletic, she tweeted a little bit ago, one NFL GM on what a trade for Myles Garrett would look like. This is an NFL GM talking to Diana Rossini. This person said, probably a 1+. Can't wait for the it will be 3 1s crowd. Not happening. 1 and a 2, 1 and 2 3s, throw a player in there. Now, if you're a Browns fan, you're expecting, if they trade Myles Garrett, to get at least 2 1s. They will not get 3. I think they could get 2. Who knows? Who are the teams that are potentially in the mix to trade for Myles Garrett? That's going to be the interesting, one of the many interesting parts of what's happening here. I'm sure there's a lot of teams that would like to have Myles Garrett. But it's got to make sense because you got to give up a lot to get him. You're going to have to sign him to an extension. Myles Garrett signed an extension in 2000, 5 years, $125 million. There's 2 years left on that deal, but he is going to want to be the highest paid. So not only do you have to give him a lot to get him, you got to make him the highest paid player. The Browns don't want to trade him. The cap's a tricky situation. This is going to be a storyline that will not go away until Myles Garrett is traded. And if that doesn't happen, it's going to go on until at least the start of the preseason. Because no matter what Andrew Berry says from here on out, it's not going to matter. Everybody's going to assume that at some point, Myles Garrett will get traded. As for Myles Garrett, I can't blame him. I can't blame him for wanting to be traded. I do think in the long run, it could be better for the Browns to trade Myles Garrett, believe it or not. But it's so hard to say that because you drafted him, you developed him. He's become an absolute superstar. He's going into the Hall of Fame at some point, and now he wants out. And it just sucks for the fans that this is what has happened. The Deshaun Watson trade, which I was in complete support of, has turned into the biggest disaster that you could possibly imagine. That trade has really destroyed a franchise that who knows where they'd be. Obviously, Baker's playing well in Tampa Bay. We'll never know if he would have been able to be a good quarterback. He's not a great quarterback. Could he have been a good quarterback in Cleveland? Could he have played at this level he's playing at Tampa? We'll never know. But it is since then we've seen Myles Garrett has to be traded. Nick Chubb, serious injury. His career may be over. More concussions for Denzel Ward. The team does not have a quarterback. It does not have a starting running back. It's got one good player at wide receiver, Jerry Jeudy, who there's still some questions about. The offensive line is getting old. Your only good player on the defensive line wants to be traded. Your best player at linebacker has a serious injury that who knows if he's ever going to be able to play again. Your best cornerback has a concussion issue and has missed games 6 times due to concussions. This is ugly, folks. There's no other way to spin it. I don't trust the GM. I'm on the fence on the coach. I want to keep him. I kind of believe in him, but it's getting harder by the day. This, to some degree, is an indictment on him as well. I mean, I can't just put it all on Andrew Berry. Some of this is on Kevin Stefanski. And even if the Browns play hardball and refuse to trade him, what happens in the locker room? And this is a complete mess. It's a complete fucking mess. And in the past, when Kyrie Irving wanted to be traded, I was apoplectic about it, mad at Kyrie. Like, what is wrong with you? But I don't feel that same way here. I saw somebody on Twitter say, Myles Garrett's wrong for this. Why? The Browns suck. If I'm an NFL player, I want to win. And Myles Garrett is telling you he feels like they have no chance to win. And they don't right now. It feels hopeless. And Myles Garrett's saying that. He's like, I only got 3-4 good years left. We suck. I don't want to be part of another rebuild because the Browns can call this whatever they want. It's a rebuild. They have no young talent. They're a terrible football team with no young talent. Question marks everywhere. GM, coach, quarterback, running back, everywhere. The owner's a clown. And this is just another symbol. When a player of this stature wants to be traded, it is a complete indictment of everything in your organization. And maybe Andrew Berry knew this was coming, and that's why he said something last week. Maybe he was preemptively saying, hey, Myles, we're not going to trade you, so don't request a trade. And Myles, I mean, he stuck it right in his face. I mean, I know I can curse here, but I don't even want to say what I'm thinking. Like, he took it out and waved it in his face. Myles Garrett, in his written statement, used Andrew Berry's words against him. Andrew Berry looks like a fucking clown right now. We have called this organization a dumpster fire in the past. They've been a dumpster fire many times. I don't know if I said this season that I thought this 3-14 year was worse than the 0-16 season. And a couple of people told me I was crazy. I believe that even more so now. What can you hang your hat on? What can you hang your hat on? You had Joe Thomas. He's retired. You had Myles Garrett. He wants to be traded. You had Nick Chubb. He's a shell of what he was. You had Baker. Some people loved him. I wasn't one of them. I had no problem with him being gone. He's playing well. Traded for Watson. Seemed like a no-brainer at the time. Couldn't be a bigger disaster. Worst trade in the history of sports. Mark Cooper wanted out. And he shot, so it wasn't the worst thing. And now, the best player in the modern history of your franchise wants to be traded. And the fact that he requested a trade hurts his trade value, at least a little bit. I just read it to you before. One GM saying they're not getting 3 first-round picks. I don't think anybody thought they would. He doesn't even think they're getting 2, whoever that is. So, man, this is just going to be such a never-ending topic until he's traded. It's just really that simple. I saw my guy Cleve TA. He suggested some teams. Last year, the Lions were brought up, but I saw a reporter in Detroit, I can't remember who it was, say it's not, they can't really do it. It's my man Cleve TA saying Arizona, Washington, the Rams, and the Packers. In a perfect world, you trade him to a team that didn't make the playoffs, so you get a higher pick. Obviously, Arizona, in that case, would be the best scenario. You'd like to trade him to the NFC, all 4 teams that TA mentions. In the NFC. You got to trade him to a team that has the potential to be a Super Bowl team next year. I think Washington, Packers, Rams probably all think of themselves that way. Arizona, I'm not sure. You'd rather trade him to a team that's not that good, but if you're a team that's not good, why would you give up all you have to for Myles Garrett? So, I think, I don't know about from a cap standpoint, but you always think of Dallas. He's from Texas. Although Jerry Jones, you think of him as, he doesn't spend that kind of money. And that's got to be factored in. That's got to be factored into anybody that's trading for him, is that he's going to want a raise. He's going to want to be, the highest paid pass rusher, which he deserves to be. Well, that's the latest. Thanks to everybody for joining me today. Thanks to Z and Alex for producing. On Wednesday, I'll have some more on this, some more on the draft. We may have a guest on Wednesday. I'll let you know. I'll be on UCSS Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday this week. Thanks to all of you for watching and listening. I'll talk to you next time. Where else but right here in the bullpen with Adam the Bull. Brought to you by Bet Rivers. See you, everybody.